Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you planned out today. Very excited. We got two new faces plus an old face with Scott. So we got Ryan joining us, got Chris joining us. Very excited to get this conversation started. Now, while I'm excited, y'all should be too. Like the show, hit the subscribe button, do the notification bell. And on top of that, we actually we over we came over the limit and we've now been able to monetize the show. So we have things like super thanks and all kinds of new buttons and newfangled stuff. If anybody wants to support the show, they can actively now during the live. If anybody has any
Super
thoughts,
thanks.
right? Super thanks. So if anybody has any thoughts, questions, comments, anything like that, put them up in the comment section. We can engage them throughout, kind of like this one. Winter Storm, good afternoon, team. Good to see you. And he says, sleep after a night shift is highly overrated. Sure. But we're happy that you're joining us. Always good to see you, buddy. Today, the topic is so others may live. But before we get into it, I want to give the guests an opportunity to introduce themselves. So, Ryan, I'm going to start with you. We'll work our way down 10 to 15 seconds. Who are you? Where you come
Oh
from?
God, the
All
pressure's
that
on.
good stuff. Pressure.
I grew up in Carleton Place. Was a decent athlete. Went to Acadia University. I got drafted and played in the CFL. And then that wasn't rough enough, so I joined the military. Served 14 years in the Royal Canadian Regiment, which released medically in 2016, and I've been a veteran advocate ever since.
Bam. 16 seconds, but I'll give it to you. Scott, 10 to 15 seconds. What do you got?
Joined the Army back in the old days, back in '86. Shaun, you know those days. And got out in '94, served in Bosnia in '92, and started the Rolling Barrage PTSD Foundation in 2016.
Bam. Love it. Chris, how about yourself?
Yeah, I'm from Okotoks, Alberta. I grew up playing hockey, played in the Western Hockey League, ultimately had a life-changing accident happen. Became the first above-knee amputee firefighter in North America. Played on our national sledge hockey team for about a decade, and I'm the director at PX3 Adaptive Hockey School and the director of the Cedar Strand Foundation.
Bam. Look at that. We
Very
got
cool.
us up.
We did it, guys.
Yes. Under a minute. I like it. So the topic of the day, so others may live. Let me give a quick rundown as to what I picked up on this. So this is a motto, and it's a motto of some of specific organizations, but the motto, so others may live, is often associated with organizations that prioritize the safety and well-being of others above their own. One such organization is the U.S. Air Force Pararescue, whose motto is that others may live. This organization specializes in search and rescue operations and is responsible for saving the lives of military personnel and civilians in danger. Now, the reason why I chose that was because everyone here has been involved in the creation of an organization that saves other people, that engages other people to save lives, to live lives, to be able to do things with their life rather than sit into the hole of their own heads or their own injuries or their own difficulties. But let's go around the table. When I say so others may live, what are the first thoughts that come up? I'm going to start with Scott. What do you think?
When others were so others may live is pretty straightforward. We do what we do so that those of us that don't have the tools in place, or maybe have the tools but aren't able to access them because of whatever issues, we do these things so that essentially they may live, so they're not inclined to follow up on ideations they may have.
Absolutely. Ryan, what are your first thoughts?
Absolutely. I think that the number one thing that we're all trying to do is prevent suicide in the veteran population. But it also, I think there's a lot of veterans who are, not living the best life that they can live. They're struggling with a lot of things, and I think they've earned the right to live a happy and a healthy life, and we should do everything that we can to make sure that happens.
Bam. Chris, how about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, you two both, Scott and Ryan, hit the nail on the head with that. I can't elaborate a whole lot more on what they've said, but in my world, which is the adaptive world, and deals both with the military and It's giving these guys, yeah, exactly, the strategies or the equipment or whatever is needed for them to live their best lives, and to be able to go out there and be productive and feel like they're productive members.
Absolutely. Shaun, what are your first thoughts?
Listening to the guests, I was thinking, we're talking about so others may live, and it's interesting how everyone is giving of themselves rather than talking about themselves, or how they're referring to others. They're doing it for others, but not considering how they're doing it for themselves for others. And so let me just add to that real quick. So I look at the guests and I consider myself and yourself, Chance, and I think that what we are supposed to do is do our lives for others so that others can do their lives. And I think there's two sides to the coin. We try to help out there. We try to have conversations that are helpful to others, but in so doing, we're helping ourselves. And so I don't want to position the start of the conversation to a degree where we're so selfless. And I think we're all selfless to some degree, but that we're so selfless that we are going to lose sight of how helpful it is for us in that journey as well.
That's a great start. Ryan, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I think he nailed it. The first time that I was basically, came forward and said, I'm having a lot of problems. Like, I was so used to, being an officer, being in a leadership position, looking after everybody else. And, I was basically sent home and isolated. And I was like, I got to do something, so selfishly. I was like, I have to do something. I'm separated from my peer group. I'm not fitting in. And so one of the first things I did was volunteer with Guitar for Vets and start teaching, and what I got just as much out of that because I was just so happy to go hang out with other veterans again. So it was my first experience with that. And that led me to other, there was a delta in my life and I was able to address it through an organization like Guitar for Vets, and with Project Enlist Canada, that the same thing happened. We recognized that there was a delta there in head injury and its effects on mental health in the veteran community. And that's how that was born as well. And that did come from me because I was asking those questions to doctors. I'm like, look, I've banged my head my whole life. Like, is there not something related to this? Because this treatment you're giving me, they're not working. And now we're figuring out that, yeah, it is a problem in the medical community is just coming around to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, for me, it was, I spent a lot of time isolated after my accident and really, got into some horrible spaces as far as, just mental health and things like that. And for me, being able to go out there and help people really returned it toward me. I was able to go out there and tell my story, which helped me actually start to accept what was going on within my life. And that acceptance piece allowed me to grow as it allowed me to help others out. And so, it started very small and things have sort of snowballed since then, but it's, speaking to other people and speaking to other organizations, especially, people with recent injuries and things like that. It's something that I definitely try to advocate for them for and for them to do, because that acceptance piece, as much as you can go out there and you can kill yourself volunteering time and being as selfless as humanly possible, but you're going to just dig yourself into a massive hole at the end of the day if you aren't using something like that to help build you back up in those types of situations.
Yeah, absolutely. Scott, come back to you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting that Ryan brings up the fact that we're doing things, in an environment where everybody is supposed to be tough. And you in turn, by doing that, you actually end up jeopardizing yourself physically and mentally. And it goes, with the injury part. Like, I received a severe head injury and I didn't realize I had a massive concussion, and to the point where my eyes were bleeding, ears were bleeding, the whole 9 yards, more tthan once. And I just kept on going. I didn't stop. I went to the MIR. I was ordered to go to the MIR by my platoon commander, and as soon as I was given the all clear, I was back out doing my thing. Right. So that sort of thing right there puts us in a position where we really have to think about what we're doing. We're trying to be there for everybody else, and our own health has been jeopardized. And whether you're selfless enough that you jeopardize your own safety, and that's an unfortunate part of what makes us who we are today too. In that we know now where that tipping point is for us. I stepped away from the rolling barrage because my health was suffering significantly, and during that time frame, I learned that I've had 26 concussions, and I didn't even play football or hockey. It was just Army stuff. And so, with Project Enlist coming out and Ryan and I speaking, I just got right on board with that. Not so much as in the leadership aspect, but I really took it to heart that there's an opportunity here for those of us who are in the veteran community and people listen to us, where we can actually, purport those messages of other organizations that are doing really good stuff. And so when it comes to acknowledging your own injuries, that's extremely important, especially in leadership roles like we have now with organizations that try to help others.
Absolutely. Shaun, come back to you. What are you thinking?
Yeah, we're talking about selfless actions, and I think that of course it's important, but it's also important for us to demonstrate how we're just trying to figure all of this stuff out ourselves, how we're trying to figure out how to keep moving not just ourselves forward, but things like this conversation, these kind of organizations, the collective, anything to do with anything that's going to benefit anyone is a good thing. But in so doing, these things out there, these organizations, as a part of it, as an individual moving towards these strategic objectives or these initiatives, I think where things go a little bit wrong for some people is they will get engaged in it and then feel that either they're not doing very well in it, or they don't belong in it, or they feel like they're screwing it up, or they feel like they don't deserve it, or maybe like Scott and myself, I can think of a time that I got blown up and went through a windshield and kind of just shook the dust off, and I was right back to work like minutes later. And that's just the game we played. It was normal. But we're supposed to talk about these things, I believe, more so than has been talked about in the past, so that others can recognize that they're not so unique from me. They're not so unique from Scott or from any of us. We all have our own individual journeys, but along the way, I think there's a whole lot of commonality out there amongst pretty much everyone I hang out with. And I think we're supposed to, through our selfless actions of trying to help others, also inject enough of ourselves into the story that is part of that greater community so that others can recognize a little bit of themselves within us, or that they can identify something in me within themselves so that we can form a little bit of a tighter communal bond. I had the privilege of meeting Scott at Operation Pegasus Jump when we were down on Vancouver Island. And it was great to see him. I didn't know him very well before then. But I mean, the moment you shake a guy's hand, and in Scott's case, and you look way up at the sky, because I'm short, he's tall. The moment that you shake a guy's hand, it changes things. But before we did that handshake, I was still considering what is this guy all about? What does he do? I hope I really like him. He seems genuine. He seems this, he seems that. But the moment I shook his hand, I knew it was all for real. And I think maybe that's a part of what I'd like to talk about today at some point, where as we'll call it social media personalities, small or big, and maybe in all of our cases, extremely small, we still represent a certain thing. But that certain thing is hard to understand until, bam, you shake that guy's hand. And then I understand it. And so there is a delta between the representation of anything that we say today and someone shaking my hand. They'll understand what we're talking about today if they shake my hand. Then it becomes real. But this conversation isn't fully real for some people because they haven't shaken my hand yet. They can maybe consider it academically or intellectually or casually listen to it and observe it, but they won't fully understand it until they're in it with me, shaking my hand. And so I think the point I'd like to make is this, that if you're listening to this, you're almost passively engaging in the process. If you really want to actively engage in the process, go shake Scott's hand, and then you're in the mix. So there is a bit of a delta between academically considering this topic and then right in it with the person who's having this conversation like Scott, if that makes sense.
That's actually, right before you got into that topic, I wrote down virtual handshakes. I was like,
Yeah.
this is definitely a topic that we need to touch on. So, Chris, I'm going to come to you first, but my question on it is, have you noticed a difference in terms of virtual handshakes, the people that you interact with online, kind of like we're doing right now, versus that initial handshake, or when people come up to you and recognize you on the street, that kind of stuff, where it would be what's the difference like? I just want to, what are your thoughts on it initially?
Yeah, no, I like there's a huge difference between the two, and especially going through the last 2-3 years that we went through with COVID and the crazy amount of how that just became the norm to meet people online and do things like that. And I was fortunate enough still during that time to talk to people with recently acquired injuries and whatnot, but you don't have that connection. You don't sort of get that person's sort of aura and what they're like until you can know their story, you can know it inside and out, but until you're actually in that same room with the person and you get to physically interact with them, whether that's a handshake or, in some of these cases, you go in there and you hug the guy just to, however you approach that. My personal opinion is it's two just vastly different things. I don't, the virtual side of things doesn't, I don't like it a whole bunch. I'm more of one of those old school guys. I grew up, playing hockey where that was the thing, right? It was a sign of respect. It was, you made eye contact, you shook somebody's hand, you were, you showed all those things. And I feel like, when we interact through things like Zoom and things like that, you don't make that personal connection. And when you're able to do that in person, like Shaun said, you can instantly tell, right? It's like, yeah, this person's a genuine person. And, that little bit of a bond is immediately made, and it's a lot easier to build off of in that sense.
I like that. Scott, what about yourself?
Yeah, I absolutely agree there. One of the things that I always say is that I look forward to shaking hands. That's my kind of tagline at the end of when I'm talking to somebody online. And I haven't met Ryan face to face yet, and we both served in the Royal Canadian Regiment, and different times. But I still want to get together and shake his hand, and his dad's too. His dad's a Vietnam vet, and I can't wait for that day to touch. Just to shake hands with these guys. Make that contact, make that touch, because as Shaun says, it changes your perspective. You can actually, it puts you in the moment, and it's really important, especially when you're talking about philanthropy and the human effect, the human part of interaction. All of this video stuff is all well and good, but there's no substitute for actual contact.
Yeah, absolutely. Brian, what are you thinking?
Well, it's, I think everything that we do should be geared towards driving in veterans towards, I'm just talking about anyone dealing with their mental health, but we're obviously, I'm working mainly with veterans, is to drive them to an in-person event. You know, it's so important for that to happen. And I can tell you, one of the most challenging things is to get veterans to pledge their brains to Project Enlist, because we're trying to do research. Try doing that online. I mean, getting someone to pledge a body part, it's, hey, you know, you do it on Zoom. But when you're in person and I'm able to explain, look, a pledge doesn't mean, you know, because soldiers take things literally, that as soon as you die, someone's going to, you know, like some Monty Python skit, they're going to come and pull your brain out of your head. There's a lot more to it than that. The pledge just means that you know, I have the speech with them, and the reason why I pledge my brain, the reason why it's important for soldiers to do that. Well, it's a lot easier to have that conversation face to face and shaking hands when you're giving a presentation overall on what on what the whole thing means. But I'll go back to that. I mean, it's, you know, one of the most dangerous things in the world for a human is isolation. And the more that we can have these talks, and the more the rolling barrage, I mean, that's why with Project Enlist Canada, we're really trying to reach out and support as many organizations as we can that have in-person events. Because I mean, that's a lifesaver right there. You get, in my experience, if you get a veteran connected to something, it could be fishing, it could be whatever connects them to a peer group. I think that, and they actually go do it. I think that saves lives.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Shaun, what are you thinking?
So many thoughts. I think that maybe first thing I should get out of the way, so that I can actually continue on with the conversation, is I don't know anything about Project Enlist, and I don't know anything about donating the brain. But I do know I've had enough concussions that I probably would fall into the profile that would be an interesting data point for the project. So first of all, I'll say I'd like to know a little bit more about it before I pledge my brain, but I'm saying that right now. One of the acts of selflessness is if you feel something, then just act on it. So I'll publicly, in a live chat podcast, bam, is that the first time a brain has ever been donated to a project before? Well,
Pledged.
You got my brain, buddy.
Yeah, pledged.
You've just got my pledge. And I really mean that. I do pledge on that. So more to follow on that, I suppose. And I think that's one of the things about selflessness, is maybe not overthinking things too much. If it just feels right, if it comes from a good dude and it just feels like it's good, then you should just act on it. And if you get somewhere into the process, halfway through the process, 3/4 of the way through the process, whatever that means to anyone out there, if it starts feeling not right, okay, recalibrate. But if something feels right, you should execute on it. And that just felt right to me. So therefore, that's my pledge. I think the second thing I would like to say is we're talking about shaking hands and in-person situations. And funnily enough, I'm in Australia right now, and it's 6:30 in the morning. On the drive to our Airbnb here in Armadale at the World Championship racecourse site, Andrew, one of the athletes that I'm down here supporting, he'd said to me, and we were kind of talking, we've traveled all over the world together, raced at lots of races together as competitors and a coach and etc. And he said to me, hey, I got a question for you. Does anyone ever say, dude, and we're kind of talking about James Bond to some degree as well. And what he said was, does anyone ever say to you, hey man, I thought you would be taller? And I think Scott actually said that to me. Because many have said it to me. And I said to my buddy Andrew, bro, you wouldn't even believe how many people have said that to me this year. Somehow I thought you would be taller. And I find it quite amusing. I think it's funny, man. I dig it. But the only way that they could say that is they had formed a avatar of me or an opinion of me or a certain presence for me before they got to shake my hand. But the moment that I was there in 3D, well, now I'm a short ass. But nothing has changed. They just were surprised on how short I was. And I think that's really important to put that point across, because that what we put out in social media is one thing, but standing there three-dimensionally next to someone, now they can contextualize it against what their thoughts were and what the truth is. And I think that that moment where they put it all together, as long as things align properly, then you're going to be solid with that person for a long time. That's just a thought.
I really like that. You're in my brain. I don't know how you're in my brain, Shaun, but you're in my brain, because every point that I keep writing down, you're hitting on. And my thought was, and I have a question for everybody here, is how do we prevent, as advocates, as somebody who is willingly giving their own time for others, how do we prevent ourselves from becoming avatars? And so, to Shaun's point, how do we continually, through the virtual realm or through the events that we're doing, how do we continually remain open and honest and try to prevent, or even should we prevent, the formation of avatars from other people looking in? How do we stay authentic, I guess, without losing ourselves? I'm going to come with Ryan. What do you think?
For me, it's a very spiritual question. I start, every day I start in meditation and in prayer. And I have to do that, because even a guy like me that's done a lot of these things, I beat myself up a lot, and I still do, and there's part of doing the things that we're doing, and I think most of us would agree. To me, the number one leadership principle is to lead by example. I mean, if you're gonna say this, you better be doing it, right? And so, I can't control that avatar, like whatever's out there, whatever people see me as. I don't know, because I have enough problems figuring out what my own avatar is. I'm changing on a daily basis. I've had some really interesting spiritual awakenings in the past year. Nothing too woo-woo, just really going back into myself and really focusing on things that I never used to focus on before. I never prayed. I never went into meditation. I never practiced being in silent, practice sitting with my turbulent thoughts. And so, that I ended up basically, I guess what I'm trying to say is within that, I have to have a real good connection with myself, and not really, be too concerned about what everyone else is thinking of me. I think I'm doing a good job. I'm sometimes overly worried about what other people think about me, when normally that's an anxiety that's coming from within me that I need to deal with on my own. So I have a hard enough time being Ryan to be worried about what my own avatar of myself is than what other people are thinking of me. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Chris, coming to you. What are you thinking?
Yeah, no, how Ryan had just spoken about, I mean, like leading by leadership, right? Like just leading by example. Your social media for so many people, I mean, it's a ultimate highlight reel when you sort of get into that realm, right? And people like to present themselves in that sense. And for me, not a big social media guy, but I'm not ever going to preach anything that I'm not willing to do myself. So in that sense, I try to stay very genuine like that. And again, like I'm evolving as well. Your people are going to have that perception of me. That perception is out there regardless of what you do or how you want to control it. And I know over the last year, just being a part of the television show that I was part of, people had these wild expectations, out of the short little clips that they saw of that. And I mean, in a lot of times it turned out that, it worked out for me in that sense, because it was one of those things that just trying to be as genuine as possible. And like I said, leading by example, so that you're not portraying something that you're not. And when you get to meet those people, they know that is the person that you're, actually finally getting a chance to meet with, and that it's not just some fake, persona that you put on in some place to get more likes or more clicks or whatever. A lot of these people do in that sense. It's something where, it's a journey that I'm on. And I mean, if people follow it, and they'll realize that this is, it's a very real thing. And, I'm not afraid to show failure or show, things go wrong for me. And I think at the end of the day, that is, the perception that generally gets out there. But yeah, you can't worry about what people think about you, because you're, if you're doing anything within that public realm, even when you're helping out as many people as everyone in this group here is helping out, you're always going to have people that are not going to like you for some odd reason, or have, whether you're stepping on toes or they just don't like the fact that what you're doing. You're going to have people that will hate on you out there, and there's nothing you can do about it. So there's no point in worrying yourself about those types of things that, you don't necessarily have control over. Control what you can control, and, just move forward with your life.
Absolutely. Scott, what are you thinking?
Yeah. So the avatar thing, I think it's a really good way to look at this. We see the stuff on social media, create your own avatar and so on. And I think it's interesting, had Chris not introduced himself saying that he was an amputee, I wouldn't have known that, because if you look at us right now, just here, we're like a Napoleonic bust. All we can see is from our pectoral muscles up, and that's it. You don't see anything else. So that in itself is a really good piece to think about, like when you're looking at people on social media and what you want to project yourself. So I clown around a lot. If anybody follows my feed, I believe in having a lot of fun. I try to interject some serious content and that sort of thing, but I try to project myself in a way that I'm approachable and when I put my book out, and I don't want to get into it, but when I put it out, as Chris mentioned, you're always going to have somebody that doesn't like you. And so I put my book out there knowing full well that I was going to take some abuse, because that's going out international now. I have a US publisher and it's going everywhere. And, so I just had to say, oh, well, I'm not going to worry about it, because I can't. I'm going to be doing a lot more good in the work that I'm doing than what will detract from one person, throwing eggs at me, which is fine. And then the second part I just wanted to mention was going back to when Shaun was talking, that that handshake, that getting to know each other part. It was he actually said to me when we got our photo taken, because he said, "Hey, let's get a picture together." I was like, "Yeah, that's cool." And he says, "I always thought you'd be shorter." And that's how that actually started. And that's why I was laughing earlier, because he thought I was shorter, and that was pretty cool. So the reality is with Shaun is, and I didn't realize this until I'd met him, was that he might be a short ass, but he's a badass short ass. And so his avatar, it really, yeah, you betcha, bro. It goes long and far in our world. Like, there was people coming up to Shaun as I just sat in the corner and watched and was entertained by all the people that were at Pegasus Jump. So many legends from the CAF were there, and Shaun's one of them. So it was really cool to shake his hand and be one of those guys that could do that. So I don't want to go take us off track, but the avatar piece, like, that's really important. Who we want to be and what we want to project ourselves so that we can help as many people as we can is super important. And thanks, Chris. Like, you nailed it with that.
Absolutely. Now, there's a reason why, if you look up in the top corner here and there's a picture of Shaun and I had to make sure that his head was below mine, so that everybody understood that, like, I was taller than he is.
Yeah, that's not
That's
hard.
a good amount, right? Like, that's super important. Shaun, any thoughts?
Yeah. So I think that we're talking about social media now, and I think everyone's pretty clear on the fact that I was pretty bad. Actually, I was terrible at social media. And I'm still pretty bad at it as well. I never was on Facebook. I didn't learn how to do the Facebooky. So when I started on Instagram, I've said it before, I didn't even know I was supposed to click likes. I didn't know I was supposed to like my friend's stuff if I liked it. I just read it and think, cool, well done, and then just move on. I didn't know the game. I didn't know the rules. I didn't know how it was supposed to be played. And by that, I mean not played insincerely. I mean, I had to learn how to sincerely learn how to authentically operate in social media, which is a construct that I didn't understand. And I still find myself challenged by it on a regular basis. So my social media, and there's a difference between my social media and any other social media that I'm involved in. I can't control that. And I can't control what the platform does with any podcast that I'm involved with them, a one show or a two show or whatever the case is. But on my own social media, I'm in full control of everything that goes on there. And my social media isn't that much of a highlight reel. It's just my life. You see some good stuff, I suppose. You see some goofy stuff. You see some dumb stuff. Sometimes you'll see me fall off a bike. Sometimes you'll see me jump a bike through the air and nail it like a superstar. Whatever you see, that's my regular day. And so there's an important difference between my social media feed and, again, the external platforms that I might have been on. And those things tend to cause me the most trouble. And I'm going to give a specific example now. One of the earliest podcasts I was on was with the Canadian podcast with Zach. And Zach had titled the podcast something, words to the effect of Shaun Taylor, the founding member of JTF2. I think there was a "the" in there. And man, I got so much pushback from that. There was guys who, I don't know, did whatever in the military and felt somehow that they were gonna do a frontal assault on me because there was a "the" in there. I didn't write the title, bro. I did not create that content on YouTube, bro. I got in front of a microphone, did my best to answer the questions, tell a little bit of my story, tell a story about some of my friends, and tell a story about the military, and then tell a story about the things I've learned in life. I did not make JTF2. I was a minor cog in the wheel. But that's the thing about social media. There's content that we can control, and there's content that we can't control. And so I did find myself in the early days getting caught up in the trying to defend my reputation, because I've said it several times in the past. If you run a good life, if you do your best, if you're helpful enough, then eventually through a body of work you will gain a reputation. And my reputation to date, I'm not going to say it's great, but it's good enough that it gets things done before I show up. And so I can leverage my reputation passively just by simply being me. But days in the future, my reputation is already at work with someone that I'm going to be talking to days from now. So if someone sullies my reputation, it's less about how I'm offended, and it's more the negative impact it will have on things like The Collective or any other podcast platforms that I'm on. Or, as an example, when I meet Scott. If someone dirts my reputation through an external social media platform that I couldn't control the narrative on, not like I try to control the narrative that much, but if that happens, it negatively impacts me personally, but then it negatively impacts Scott because now he's standing next to me in a photo. And externally, someone's running a program against me, which then again is rippling right through me and onto Scott. Now, Scott's a cool dude. He's going to understand how that all works, and it's not going to impact our relationship. But I think we have to be careful on not just casually saying, you know what, there's things that we can control and there's things that we can't control, and I just try not to focus on that. in the spirit of things, I do understand that to be very true. But when it comes to social media, I do try to make a little bit of an extra effort to shut down the grid on anyone who's trying to be a goof if I think it's going to impact the greater good. And I hope that makes sense.
Interesting.
I'm just going to say one thing in there. Whenever I hear anything that comes off of social media that might be negative, and I know the person that's involved, generally speaking, a shoulder's like a brook trout. All that stuff just washes right off. And I'll go to the source and say, hey, this is what I heard, or this is that, and just so you know, and then let it figure its own way out, or whoever is involved, they can deal with it. So yeah, I get it, Shaun, like the ripple effect that happens, and I haven't been subject to it, so that's a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shoulders like a brook trout.
It's an interesting topic, and I was thinking haters was going to be a topic for another day, but I think this is a good way to kind of dive into it as well. Is that when, as you said, Chris, is that someone somewhere is not going to like what you're doing, regardless, right? You just have to kind of accept that if you're going to be in the public eye, if you're going to be promoting things or working as an advocate. Now, based not so much how do we just deal with the haters, but how do we engage the haters? Let's put it that way. How do we?
Well,
what do you got?
I don't.
What do you got? You don't?
I don't. Yeah, they're insignificant in the course of the day, and that's the best for me. That's the best way to look at it. You can spend your whole day hating while you're spending all of that energy, wasting all of that energy doing this. I'm over here making sure that this guy doesn't kill himself. Simple as that. If I save one guy, the haters can hate for eternity. So yeah, I don't let that shit get to me. It's pointless. They'll have energy. Though. Oh, sorry about that.
No worries. And the reason I'm going to get Ryan and Chris on this too, and I just want to put this thought out there. The reason I brought up this question is that I actually had a guy who a friend of mine had said, hey, I got this buddy, he's not doing well. Could I introduce you to and have this? You guys could have a conversation. I was like, sure, yeah, absolutely. Let me chat with him. And right off the bat, he thought I was a Chinese spy. And so he was asking for stuff like, he was like, you're just a spy. You want to know information about me? Send me a picture right now with the newspaper. Like things like that, where I was just like, I don't need to deal with this, man. I don't. But I stayed engaged with him. I stayed, like, I would continually kind of hit him up and be like, hey, what's going on? How's it doing? So, to a point that he kind of developed a bit of a virtual avatar of me. And eventually that got him to break his guard a little bit, and I eventually got to talk to him. And over time, he's now sober, in therapy, and working towards a better life. So, like, sometimes haters or the people that attack you right away, they're just using that to keep the distance so that nobody can help them, kind of. You know what I'm talking about in that regard? So I'm wondering, I guess maybe the better question is, how do we tell the difference between the troll and the person who is just trying to push you away so that you don't have to engage them? Ryan, I'm going to come to you first.
Well, I've had plenty of experience with the support line that we run, as well as and my first response, no matter how terse they are, no matter what they say, I'm used to NCOs speaking bluntly, so that doesn't bother me at all. And the first thing I hit them with is empathy, and just write them back and say, I understand there may be some frustrations here. And I give them my phone number, and sometimes they don't call, but I've done that. And normally when you hear, I'm not going to get into a match over keyboard warrior. I'm not going to do that. But I mean, I don't know how many times, and I'm sure a lot of you in the veteran advocacy work have been up late on the phone with somebody, have been, really gone out of your way to help. And that phone call, when you hear a voice and sometimes You just got to listen. They just need to get some stuff off their chest. And then you start small with actionable steps. But I'm not gonna. My first instinct is I don't think it's normal. There's difference between arguing a point. Maybe Scott puts something up there that someone doesn't agree with, and you're having this little fun kind of back and forth argument. And then there's the other side to it where it turns, almost abusive or aggressive or whatever the tone is. I don't think you see as much of that on social media, but I can tell you some of the emails we get into the support line, obviously we're dealing with some mental health challenges there. And so it's happened on a few occasions where I've reached out to them and I didn't send them a terse email. I'm not there to discipline them. I'm just saying I'm the veteran associated with this. Why don't we jump online? You've got a lot of issues here that we could potentially sort out. I can tell you how we can help you. Being the support line in brain injury. The rest of your stuff that you're talking about that maybe that's Veterans Affairs that you're frustrated with, or financial stuff, maybe there's some other organizations that I can refer you to. But just come at it from that angle. And I've had some success with that. And then some of them, they just don't come back. They just want to yell at the screen and maybe they're just not ready for that.
That's a great point. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah. Much like Scott, I know I keep saying that, but you guys make such great points. For me, it's just being empathetic toward the people that want to do that. And I think in my realm, it's a little bit different. Just what I go out there and try to accomplish physically and things like that. As far as sport, I actually get a lot of hate from the adaptive community, just for the fact that, I'm out there doing this kind of stuff, and not that it either makes these people feel bad or it makes them angry, because it, gives a different perception of what the adaptive community is. And the adaptive community is such a bizarre realm to navigate. You have people that have acquired injuries that go out there and want to, they've learned stuff over the course of their life. And, whether they were in the military or whether they were, athletes or whatever it is, they want to pursue, whatever their goal is moving forward. And they work in that realm. And unfortunately, there's a large group of them that just want to be taken care of and just have this, really, I'm not going to say downtrodden, but that's just this ideology that they should just be looked after. And when they see people sort of rise up and accomplish, very unique goals or impressive things, they instantly come at it with just hate. And I mean, it's a bizarre thing, because what a lot of the people that I work with, I mean, you're out there, they're doing what they love to do, but they're also, I mean, people do become inspired by what people are able to overcome and, and grow into. And then you have this other end of the spectrum where, you're making somebody essentially look bad. And it's very hard to get over that hurdle with these people. I mean, you can tell them, like, hey, like, if you need to talk, here's my number. I'm never going to engage somebody online that way. But I mean, if somebody comes at me with like that, then it's just, I don't know what their issue is with things. And I mean, we've had people that we've been able to sort of turn corners with, because it was just, the anger came out in that direction because of, other circumstances within their lives. But we've had lots of people that have come out and they just don't like you because you make them look bad at the end of the day. They want to live their life just living off the government and not potentially moving forward and trying to be productive. They just like that tiny little bubble that has been created for them. And so for me, it's a tough realm to navigate, because how do you, as many people as you're helping out, like Scott has said, you're going to have these, I know that I'm helping people out. And so for these, haters that end up coming up on the back end, you just sort of have to let them go and they're going to do their thing. And there's nothing that you can do to change their mind about it, unfortunately. And just engaging them almost seems to infuriate them even more. They take that and they build off of it, and they have their own perception of the situation, and you can't change that perception. It's built in, and you're screwed the more you try and engage. And regardless of how much help you're trying to give them, they won't take it, and it just turns back into more anger. And again, then that just, they'll come up on social media and there'll be those keyboard warriors that are just looking for that fight online, or looking to make that connection so that they can engage and just try and sully your name in any way.
Yeah, it's actually sounded more and more like the veteran community. Like, I think those are pretty similar.
No, I think there's a lot of similarities that way. I was speaking with his name's Tom Hoppy today, and he deals with chronic pain and things like that. So he's a former vet here, and we just dealing about chronic pain and how to make that transition, especially away from the military and from high performance sport. There's a lot of physical things, but there's not a lot of mental pieces that there's some gaps that are missing there. And I mean, it was a very unique way. I played with a lot of vets, but to hear him speak about it in the way that we were having our conversation, I mean, the number of parallels is, between the two is there's a lot there, and a lot that can be learned, and a group that could all ultimately almost be combined, because there is a lot of commonality there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Scott, what do you got?
Yeah, maybe this will help steer us back towards the philanthropy side of things, away from the haters part. Chris just said a line that I've used for years, and it's this guy came up to me and he says, "You're making us look bad." And I thought to myself, the only one that makes you look bad is you. You're not applying yourself. You could actually do better. You just don't have the energy, or whatever it is you have. It's not working for you. And this goes back to a couple days ago, Shaun. You had a show on, and I just sat there and with watching, because you were. I mean, I love listening to you talk. You're so intellectual, and so you had said a piece on being ordinary and extraordinary, and through that, you can be an ordinary person or you can be an extraordinary person, and what that comes down to is whether or not you're going to apply yourself. And so, when it comes to philanthropy and what we're doing, helping others, whether they're vets or first responders or even just the general public, there's a cost, because I paid attention to that part too. And you really brought up some good points, Shaun, like in both of those regards, whether you're ordinary or extraordinary, and whether you're willing to pay the cost, and what the cost is for everybody else that you're associated with, because there's a ripple effect in all of that as well. And we pay those costs every day trying to help other people get up. We're trying to lift people. I don't have any time whatsoever to kick somebody down. I will go and help them up, even the haters. And I don't want to get back on that, but I will try and help them up too, right? And that's part of the cost, because you're always going to accept that little piece of burden. You got to pay for it somewhere. And that's a real part of trying to help others. And you have to help yourself before you can help somebody else. So that comes back to the health piece and all of that. So I'll just sum up with that. Thanks, Shaun and Chris.
Absolutely. Shaun, what are you thinking?
Well, I'm thinking that when I think of the adaptive community, which I don't know too many people in it, and I don't understand the community overly well, first guy that comes to mind is Mark Ormrod. And I think of him as an extraordinary human being because of all of the things that he does for that community, all of the engagement that he has, not just in that community, but with all communities. Mark really creates a massive footprint in my mind in respect to being righteous. And he doesn't focus on the specifics of a singular community. He's engaged in, I've lost track of how many cool people that he is helped by or he helps. And I think that that's kind of an important aspect to this conversation, perhaps, is through considering philanthropy or through being selfless, perhaps as veterans or as adaptive community members and etc. Perhaps sometimes we just stay in our lane a little bit too much, where we identify ourselves as a veteran. I'm going to go help veterans, first responders, law enforcement. That's how I used to think. But then when the collective got created, we started thinking broader. And now, rather than just trying to help veterans, law enforcement, and first responders, I find that we're just trying to help freaking anyone. Doesn't matter where you live, doesn't matter what you do, served or didn't serve, this, that, or the other thing. I don't care anymore. Just trying to be super helpful as much as we can. And so perhaps the selflessness aspect for anyone who's listening out there, if you've found yourself maybe in a tight lane of philanthropy, maybe just take a moment today and think about if that's achieving the outcomes that you want, and maybe more importantly, that is achieving the outcomes that you could create if you just expanded your lane a little bit more and considered the other sides of your lane on who you can help. And through that process, maybe expand your footprint, much as Mark Ormrod has done with his life.
Yeah, Mark is awesome. It was my first thought too. Was as soon as he said the adaptive community, I was like, oh, like Mark. Yeah. And now we're gonna run short on time here, but I wanted to really hammer down that point is that I found in the advocate community when we started the Walk for Veterans, it was like the Walk for Veterans. It was only Canadian veterans. We're gonna help these people, and then it was like, well, I mean, other people serve too, and it's a very similar, and so like our scope broadened just a little bit, and then our scope broadened just a little bit more, and our scope broadened just a little bit more, and by the end of it, by the time I stepped away from it, it was, veterans, first responders. It was, I just forgot their name, like prison guards, and like everybody basically, anybody that we started, anybody who served was part of it. And I think that that's a great point you brought up, Shaun, is that the farther you get into it, the more shades of gray you can see. Mm-hmm. It's no longer just these people are hurting and I need to help them. When you start to realize, oh man, these people are hurting too. Oh man, these people, oh wow. And you start to actually really broaden that view. And I want to give everybody some time here before we shut down to talk a little bit about the organization that you are a part of, how it helps, that kind of stuff, and give some final thoughts on everything we've been talking about in terms of philanthropy. So I'm going to start with Ryan because you're on top of the screen. So give us a quick rundown as to what Project Enlist does, and then some final thoughts on the day, and then we'll move down the list.
Well, really what we're doing with Project Enlist Canada is we're studying the mental health, the side effects of repeated blows to the head, not just concussion, not just TBIs. We're pretty good at that stuff, but prolonged exposure to head contacts. So that all started in sport, studying, football players, and football players started to get this disease called chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which is where tau proteins in the brain get shook up and they land in parts of the brain they shouldn't be, and they cause problems. Lou Gehrig's, Alzheimer's. These are what they would call old people, old man diseases that were showing up in 30-year-olds, and so when they studied 100, I believe it was 106 brains were military brains in the States were autopsied, close to 70% had the same disease, CTE. So what we're trying to do in Canada is to study Canadian veteran brains. No one's doing it. No one's doing that through autopsy. And a lot of times in mental health, the side effects of long-term, these long-term impacts are very similar to PTSD, anxiety, depression, but the treatments are completely different. So we need this research. We need it to be done. And we need people to understand in the medical community that these repeated blows to the head that soldiers face have an impact on their mental health. Right now, this is very important. Everyone hears this. Right now, the medical community, if you haven't had a head injury within the last year, they don't associate it with any mental health outcomes at all. And that's just not true. The science, we put together a team from Oxford University it's a physician education package to teach physicians in Canada that this is an issue. So right now, if you went to your doctor and you're having these mental health challenges and they're not getting better and you keep getting medicated and you're not getting better, look into head injury. You can go to our support line under Project Enlist Canada. There's a support line there. It's a patient navigation system. And it's not more medical doctors. It's not more psychiatrists. It's actually things like physiotherapy, You know, there's things that happen in the brain from repeated exposure that you know, timing mechanisms get thrown off, your balance, and a lot of this stuff is physiotherapy related. I know that we talked about, when I first jumped on, the importance of physical fitness and nutrition and sleep, and something that we're calling cognitive reserve, which is using your brain. But using your brain, sure, playing the guitar is good, but being social, you know, having that peer support is very important. So yes, we talked about Project Enlist, trying to get brain pledges in there so we can force the issue, saying we need you know, this type of research to be done on veterans' brains. But if you need help right now and you're struggling, go to our support line and fill it out, and we'll connect you with people where you live that have the expertise that you're looking for.
Absolutely. Let's go to Scott then. How about yourself?
Oh, okay. I'm not going to talk too much about the Rolling Barrage. Everybody can look it up, the Rolling Barrage PTSD Foundation. It's about motorcycle enthusiasts, vets, first responders, and anybody else who wants to come out. What I'd like to actually talk about more than anything is that there's a multitude of other organizations out there that are actually really good. And if motorcycle riding isn't one of your things, you can try Operation Vet Build. It's where vets go and build models, plastic models. It's completely different, makes you focus. There's Heroes Mending on the Fly. You can go and do fly tying. I mean, there's all kinds of different avenues other than just motorcycle riding, and it's not everybody's venue, and that's great. So I really suggest that people look around, find out what works for you. You don't have to come and shake my hand and ride motorcycles. There's a multitude of other things that are out there that are going to work, and I really want to impress that on people to go and do that. Support lines are there, like Ryan just mentioned, you know, with Project Enlist, and they'll talk to you about anything. They'll try and find the answers. So will I. If you call the Rolling Barrage or send us an email, we'll try and figure out what works for you. That's the important part about you know, being in the positions we're in. I'm not going to turn anybody away. None of us will here. We're going to try and figure it out. And then one of the biggest things we do is follow up. We don't just let you hang. We'll call you back or we'll email you and tell you, hey, I found this resource. Try that. That's the really important part of all of this, especially with the collective. There are so many shows here that you can go back and watch shows because they're all archived. You can watch stuff and, oh, hey, I didn't know that, or I didn't know that, or I picked up a new piece today. That's the really cool part about everything. When it comes to Project Enlist, I donated my brain, or pledged my brain right away. I was like, when I'm done, you can have it. And not until then. There's not going to be any Hannibal Lecter thing going on, but you know, it's really important because they can learn so much from our brains and what's happened. Everybody's, you know, fills out their donor card and they're willing to give up their kidney and their liver and their this, that, and the next thing, their heart, eyeballs even. And nobody even thinks about the brain. So this is a really cool piece of current history that's being made. And I applaud the Concussion Legacy Foundation in Canada and Project Enlist. It's pretty cool stuff. And I suggest everybody really look into what's involved. That's everything.
Absolutely. Chris, how about yourself?
Yeah, you know, I guess first I have the Cedar Strand Foundation, which is, you know, a foundation we created after my accident and after I was able to get reimmersed into sport, that allows us to purchase sporting equipment for people with disabilities, to help them get, you know, sort of reactivated into just being active or having an active lifestyle, just, you know, because the cost of things are just so much more expensive. You know, people don't realize the cost of prosthetics. You know, when I tell people I got 140 grand strapped to my body right now with my leg, they're just blown away. You know, and it's not like buying, you know, my 8-year-old. It's not like buying him you know, a $100 pair of basketball shoes and a basketball and he can go out and shoot hoops. It's buying a $4,000 chair and a basketball. And when you're living with kids with disabilities, that you know, that $4,000 is, you know, generally used elsewhere. And, you know, it limits people that way. And so that's, you know, that's our initiative with the Cedar Strand Foundation. And then the hockey school, the AMP Hockey Academy, is something that we break down all the barriers to allow kids to play sport there as well. It's one of the few hockey schools out there that actually incorporates adaptive athletes with our stand-up athletes. So, it's completely free of cost. Kids are able to go out there. We have sleds, we have everything that you need to do. We have, access to wheelchair basketballs, or basketball chairs, all of that stuff. So kids can come out, try sports, try sledge hockey, get out there. They can skate with their family. We've got sleds for family members, and again, we get them out there with our able-bodied kids. And so you get to see a really cool dynamic change, because we get the able-bodied kids out in sleds. And, a lot of these kids that don't have that, don't get a lot of chances to be leaders in more specifically sports or classroom, surroundings, things like that. All of a sudden they're out there and they're buzzing around these kids, and that dynamic changes all of a sudden. And you have a kid that has never been a leader, and he's out there having to be a leader and teaching kids and how to do things. So yeah, those are the sort of two big, big projects that we're pushing behind right now.
Absolutely. Now, I don't think anybody gave any final thoughts on that one, but I think we're good for now. But Shaun, any final thoughts on anything we've gone over so far?
Yeah. How fun. Yes. So before the collective started, before it was a twinkle in anyone's eye, I was really scratching my head on this subject, on how disorganized Canada is, on how disconnected Canada is, on how there's a bunch of guys that I know who are just trying to be helpful. But no one was talking to anyone. In fact, quite the contrary. Everyone was arguing with everyone. When I looked at the landscape, I thought it sucked. There was a bunch of people that were doing good things, but not as a cohesive force, not as a combined effort, not as a fighting unit. It was private bloggins over there, private bloggins over there, all the private bloggins in the world doing all good things, but not as a cohesive fighting unit to really move the needle. And so I'd said to Chance, man, as one of our tertiary things that we've got to do over here on the collective one day is we have to combine our forces across Canada so that it can become a recognizable organization of kicking some ass. So this is the first day that this has occurred, where we've had people talk about their organizations, their initiatives, the things that are close to them, that is now somehow tied with a common thread on the collective. Now, I'm not suggesting that anyone's working for anyone or anyone's reporting to anyone or anyone's guiding the ship. None of us really know, at least here on the collective, none of us really know what we're doing most days. But we're trying to get ourselves organized to do things more organized. And so because of our efforts, just recently, the Canadian Armed Forces Transition Group headquarters contacted me. I spent 90 minutes in a group meeting with them, Zoom group meeting with them, to discuss how the collective can be part of a national registration system that they're now starting to put into place, where various organizations out there can be vetted, given a nod, and then put into the directory, so that if someone wants to nationally figure out, I'm really struggling at home, I'm broke, and how would I gain access to funds? Well, when I was being asked those questions before we started the collective, I'd shrug my shoulders and say, dude, I only learned of a thing called Veterans Affairs the other day. Like, I don't have any of these answers. I'm still trying to figure a boatload of things out myself. So if I don't have all of the answers, how can I give you all the answers? So I wanted to get some answers, and I wanted to start talking to some people, and I wanted to start creating a fighting force, all of us involved in moving the needle a little bit more. Now we're getting a little more cohesive. And eventually, I hope, my fingers are crossed, that one day in the not too distant future, all of your organizations will be in a national registration, so that people, if they're struggling with the adaptive struggles that they might be struggling with, if they can't gain access to funds or they can't gain access to answers, then hopefully in the near future there will be people who are on a registry that someone can reach out and say, I've got lots of questions, but I've got no answers. Can you help me out? Now they've got a centralized repository for not the only way to do things, but a way to do things that will then encourage them to join on their own trajectory of solutions. And if they start struggling along that way and they need recalibration, they can tuck back into a national registration directory and see who else can help them on that next little problem. Because I know at one point, I was like standing out in the middle of nowhere by myself thinking like, no one is talking to anyone on these subjects. We are not working together well. So this is the first day I've ever said that this is kind of one of the things that we're trying to do. This wasn't planned. Nothing ever is. We just try to keep the wheels on the bus as we keep, pushing it down the highway. But this was a really encouraging conversation for me because I see 3 different organizations that I think would be excellent additions to these kind of centralized repositories for solutions for everyone else out there who was at one point just like me, who didn't have a freaking clue about how to move forward in a more organized manner. So thanks, fellas, for the conversation. And thanks for being part of me kind of saying this is what we're trying to do, I guess.
I like it. Now, we are well over time. So first off, Chris, Scott, Ryan, thank you guys so much. This has been a great conversation. Really enjoyed it. I personally have learned so much already. So I'm going to just state very, very simply, learn about what you need, build upon those lessons that you've learned, and grow every day with us here on The Collective. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Chimo.